Loosening my chains as we speak. Fruit is ripening in my seed. Loosening your chains as we speak. Karma will be cleaned through your seed.
Tonight, I would primarily like to talk about you. I know that that's the most exciting topic that there could ever be. So I'd like to leverage that reality. And a part of leveraging that reality is accepting that simple fact that you are the most important person in the world. Not just any world, your world. And when we begin to engage with our reality in relation to meditation, with that at the forefront of our experience, things begin to change quite dramatically at whatever depth that you're working with within your meditation practice. And the reason for that is because you become the single individual who makes all choices within your inner reality. And the simplicity within that statement can sometimes actually be a bit daunting. For a meditation practice even. But the truth is that ultimately you are the one who is making the choice. That means if there's a thought or no thought, that was on purpose, based upon the decision that you made. So now to create simplicity within the beauty of the simple fact that you are the center of all of this. How do we then do that in relation to your meditation? What is the simplest thing that then you can do? Sometimes it's also the only thing that you can do at that moment in time within your meditation practice, and that is to soften, surrender, let go, and to simply just relax. And through that relaxation, we enable an ability to see, to hear, to smell, to taste, to feel this quality of spatial awareness that we're talking about when we are talking meditation. So a quality of spatial awareness is what we want to manifest again and again and again in relation to who you are as this nucleus of experience. But what is always left for a particular level of meditation experience is a resting point which consists of you staring at the back of the eyelids or into a spatial awareness that you can achieve very easily, but then beyond that point it feels like there's nothing there. Have you ever noticed that? Not just within your meditation practice, but also in the world that you engage with. We engage so intimately with ourselves in all facets of experience, we begin to lose sight, quite naturally, of the possibility which exists beyond that which you are experiencing or that which you are seeing. So that in our immediate, for very good reason, becomes the truth and border of reality that we experience. So one of the focal points of a meditation practice is to expand the border. And expanding the border, we're successfully expanding the mind and its understanding. The more we're able to expand the mind, the greater ability we're able to see in this endless possibility, this eternal quality. Now, this eternal subtlety of movement is presenting itself within that spatial awareness directly in front of you, so that space between you and I. So for this particular stage of meditation practice, we want to pierce, we want to penetrate into the center of the space itself. Does that make sense? So the space between you and I, there's another layer of endless eternal potential. Could manifest as anything. And what we want to what we as meditators wish to manifest from that space is the most authentic quality of experience that we possibly can have of ourselves. You as an individual, but from the perspective of an expanded mind. You as the individual from the perspective of this depth of awareness, of this place that exists within the space that you see between you and I. Now the reasons potentially, meaning on an expanded format, as to why we would want to engage meditation in that way, is because what we want to leave behind is this subtlety of distractive thought. And one solid way of doing that is engaging with the subtle sense perceptions that we have naturally built into the body system. So that was connected to this smelling, tasting, seeing, hearing, feeling. So in the most subtle of those sense perceptions, there is still thought which is connected to it. Thought is always side by side with personality. Personality is continuously fueling that type of thinking. The personality is, of course, your persona as you express it externally to the world around you, but also internally to your thought emotion level. So that level of mind that is still engaging with the reality. So we keep getting pulled back to that engagement level of mind, and what we want to really cultivate is that deeper connection. Not to the level of subconscious, but sub-experience, which is going deeper than that everyday operation of mind, but within its depth, it's also becoming higher in its ability to resonate, frequency. So now within this relationship of cultivation to a very specific individual, which is of course you, through this deeper experience of meditation as we explore the quality of space between you and I, and as we successfully begin to surrender, let go, and relax through some of these thought formations, what we are left with is the experience of nothing. So it's within this realm of nothing, the space between you and I, that a meditator who has successfully calmed the mind to the point of seeing that mysterious substance, we are now able to engage with the layers of experiential expression, which then will enable the body-mind of you as the meditator to successfully join is a very specific word, the activity and cognitive understanding of body, of breath, and of mind to this next level of your meditative experience. So we want to successfully be able to move everything forward. And what I mean by that is all of you, I think, can agree that you're pretty good at getting to where you're at within your meditation practice. Would you agree? You always go to that, pretty much that same spot. But now what we want to do is to be able to get to the next place of meditation. So where it says, this is my border, this is my boundary of reality, I've hit it, I've done it, we must now re-engage the basics of softening, of surrendering, of relaxation. Any questions so far? Yes, good sir.
I think maybe like the challenge that a lot of people have is to do those steps, but do them without thinking.
That's right.
We're just sort of conditioned and trained to think our way into things, to follow techniques that are within that experiential form of mind, not that more subtle level of mind that you want to access. So how do you do that without thinking then?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's a very good question. And the truth is that the thought which occurs is actually one of the slower aspects of our understanding. And we've discussed this before, but it's one of those things that keeps coming back multiple times throughout the day, is that I have the experience of what I know already, and then the thought comes to reinforce it. It's an amazing thing to me. But now when we put that play into a meditative experience, we have the opportunity, we have this leverage of relating to ourselves within that quiet place. So we can really hone the skill of feeling our understanding rather than thinking it. Does that make sense? Feeling the understanding through the sensations felt within the nervous system. So back to your question as to how do we adhere or connect to a technique while attempting not to think? Well, the answer behind that is these steps within this particular technique are actually natural steps that occur within a meditation practice. Pretty much clear across the board, this will just naturally happen. First you sit and become comfortable. And then we tune to the rhythm of the heart. And then we feel this flowing fluid through the body. And then you find that temperature within the center of the tissue of the body as it radiates outwards. So these are natural steps. So what I'm saying to you is that we want to be absolutely natural in this witnessing, in this experiencing. So how do we get to that authenticity of self, not in the long game of the final aha moment where the gong is going and the petals are falling down from the heavens and all of these wonderful wild things are happening, but rather paring it back just to that one next step. And how does that engagement occur? How do I get to know myself in such a fun way that I'm able to accept the fact that, oh yeah, this is who I am now, within this moment in time, and be able to then dovetail the conversation as it's arising as a thought and realizing that, wait a minute, I'm having the thought, and this is how I'm going to dovetail the thought to go back into a dormant state, back into a relaxed place. And you have the power to do that. So then when we say that I want to make my meditation deeper, that's the request. I want to make my meditation deeper. I want to align more strongly to this natural law which governs all things. Now that's a true statement. Then it's coming from that individual who wishes to bring it to fruition. So then we engage all of our resources on that single task, understanding what's beyond that veil, understanding how to achieve some of these spiritual heights or some of the worldly depths and heights that people achieve. So it's about developing that keen awareness and subsiding the thought, because the thought is what is corralling the awareness of the mind and saying, this is the border of your reality, no matter how expansive the thought is.
So would it be accurate to say that thinking is a learned behavior then?
I think that the thought experience is natural. It's just innate in who we are, but now how we think is learned behavior, both from the inside and from the influence of outside, for sure.
So something as subtle as just awareness, just like a very background, soft mental experience, is that a type of thought then? Is all mental activity thought?
Yes, to some extent, most definitely. Mm-hmm. If you see the image, if you hear it. Mm-hmm.
Even that subtle awareness we're working to cultivate is, in essence, thought.
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So, now that being said, we want to be able to also examine how our thinking process sees, so as a vista across our day or across our direct experience with our life, how does your mind see that in relation to thought? Because now that will cultivate so much. So what comes out of your day is either the nutrients that then one will use for their meditation practice, or the hurdles and challenges which one will then see and experience inside their meditation. Mm-hmm. So the thought formation and how it orchestrates the mental experience is really important. And we want to ensure that it's conducive to our life experience, right? Because you are the one experiencing it. So if there's ever any snag or a presence of challenge that has come up as an indicator for you in any way, shape, or form, that's something that needs to be looked at. So either there's a dynamic solution that's waiting to be found, or it's something that has been expired in its usefulness, like maybe it was a concern, but now it's a fear that's no longer rational. It's a belief system that no longer exists. All of these account for the baggage that we take into our meditative experience, but those bags, as you know, we have to carry around, so put them on your head. Like, how ergonomic can you get with all that luggage? And we know about that, right? So this baggage concept, but it goes all the way through. But we're not losing anything, because this is the thing with understanding, is we always have it. So yeah, you already know that you have this to-do list. You already know. You even wrote it down, put it in your phone. You already know what are your strengths and what are your weaknesses within anything that you're doing. See what I mean? So how your thought formulates your experience is actually how you're relating to yourself, which is awesome. Because if you have this hilarious thing going on inside your head, inside your own self, you are the individual that then can shift that. And that's a profound practice to take on. Mm-hmm. Limited thinking, be gone, as they say. Any other questions about that?
Not about that. My last question would be about thoughts and emotions, because those get kind of separated in this technique. And I guess what I've found is it's just they tend to go together most of the time. Thoughts are colored by an emotion, even of just a subtle sort, and an emotion is, based on this previous definition, also a type of thought, I guess. So how to maybe approach those two particular steps of the meditation a little more finely.
Well, that's a good question. And when we're looking at thought versus emotion, we want to look quite closely at them. So for an emotion, for instance, what is the purest expression of an emotion? How could you categorize that? So you could say, well, happiness is an emotion, sadness is an emotion, fear, frustration. So that's the essence of an experience which we call emotion, right? We can categorize many potentially, but we want to be able to hone in on that, which is enabling us to separate an emotion from a thought. Because even though one can trigger the other and that they live very closely to each other, they're actually separate experiences. Thought is thought, emotion is emotion. And we want to go through the growing pains of being able to separate them so that they each have their own identity. And in their own identity, they are given the opportunity to see their own self-worth. And in their self-worth, they can then begin to strengthen themselves within themselves. And then through the other side, become an active participant, a deciding factor that emotion wishes to be a part of this experience that is Kevin's life. It's that level of intelligence in all of these parts that make up your human experience, right? Emotion feels like it has a whole intelligence of its own that's separate from this decision maker. But because that's built in naturally to the human psyche and the human process, we want to turn around and honor that simple fact that it has such a strength of independence within you, even though it's so closely related. And within recognizing the strength of that independence and respecting it, literally doing things that are best for your emotional experiences and body. What is best for your emotional experience and body in two realms. One, this rest, relaxation, and then two, the challenging of it. So we have to challenge the emotion to be able to grow. Because oftentimes we have preconceived notions and ideas, which are the belief systems. So belief system is now separate from thought also. But belief system is really closely related to the emotional body. So oftentimes a belief will then trigger the emotion, which will then spur the thinking. And then the thinking is now reinforcing the emotion, which is then double reinforcing the belief. Does that make sense? So it's a beautiful symphony of moving parts that make up the whole. And what we want to do is actually consciously be able to separate them so that then we see space between thought, between emotion, between personality, and then what exists beyond that. And if we can simply become present with just one, what we've done is successfully learned how to relax. That means everything. And we've actually strengthened our concentration to have one conversation at a time with ourselves. And that is a growth development that we must engage with. But we often, as human beings, look at the whole picture, which is really good. Big thinking is great. But then from this big thinking place, we have to actually engage with the next small step. And that little step is where we see most of the reward within a developing meditation practice. So this is why it's broken down in little steps and stages like that. So just one. But if you cannot do that, it doesn't mean, oh, I just throw the technique away. It doesn't work. It means that when the technique is now placed inside your system, this is the initial response. Of course, it's like a stabilizer, which will stabilize and potentially even reorganize how the body's psyche works. Because it's working perfectly for itself right now. Regardless if you like it or not, it's working perfectly. So now we have to keep reinforcing that it's perfectly working. There's actually nothing wrong. This is based on our own personal growth and development. But now how do I increase the ability there? How do I let go of that which is no longer needed? Yeah, you're welcome. Any other questions? It's making sense. Meditation is making sense. So easy. And the simplest thing is, if you're having a thought, not needed. But then how? How do you engage your thinking in such a way that you can dissolve it down? And that is your fun. How do you do that? I could tell you how I do it, but it wouldn't even make any point because it's unique to me. But what is shared is the technique itself. And that goes for meditation in general. Whatever technique you wish to use, then ideally doing that to 150%, because that's what's going to be the marker for the mind to wrap itself around, right? Because there's an object that's needed for the mind. If there's no object in place, the mind just goes in all directions. So we need subject and we need object. We need this observer, the one who is going to be recognizing the subtle yeses that say, yes, this feels right. Yes, that sounds right. Yes, that smells right. Yes, that tastes right. Yes, that feels right. Did I say feel? Those 5 senses, all engaged within the same observation. One single thing. And you're free to choose whatever you want, whatever is uplifting, whatever is connecting. But then ultimately, ideally, naturally it falls within one of the categories of body, breath, mind, or that mysteriousness of dynamic stillness between you and I. It will inevitably do that. If I ask you to close your eyes right now for 3 minutes, it would click into one of those positions. So now within the body, breath, mind, or dynamic stillness experience, what is then that which you experience within it? So is it a deepening of comfort? Is it the rhythm of your breathing? Is it the points that make up this active mind of thought and emotion and so on? Or is it beyond all of that? You've moved through all of that, and it's just listening to pure sound, just seeing pure space. And now honoring that. So then, if in fact you can, with confidence, even if it's 20% worth of confidence, say, yes, I can hone in on one of those things, then we ask the question, well, how do you sustain that? And you will come up with all these answers as to how you're going to sustain the ability to just concentrate all that is conscious within you on that single subject or object. And there will be steps. So from you being able to do that, what are those micro steps moving away to the activity of the mind? And then from that full action of mind, what are the steps that then you take back into that very quiet place? Do you see what I mean? Now maybe at first listening it sounds so complex, but in deeper resting into the listening, it's actually really simple, and ideally very logical. For instance, when you're working with your body, you pay close attention to how you walk, I'm assuming, from what I observe from my world around me. So you're very, very observant as to how your heel hits the floor, and then how the mound of the foot hits the floor, and then how the toes hit the floor, and then how you shift that weight from left to right and keep yourself leaning forward so that you keep walking forward, right? And there's a whole process of protocol that takes place every time you take a step. And you're actually very present with it. And that same level of analysis and understanding we want to exist when we're sitting in one position with our eyes closed. But now the moving part is no longer your body, it's your mind. Not the mind itself, because the mind itself is this massive vastness, is it not? If you close your eyes real quick and look into your mind and show me where the end is, not possible. So the mind is just this open vastness of movement, of concise intelligence, but what is creating the oscillations within the mind experience is all of this thought formation. So now, just to be a little bit more grounded in the clarity of what I'm attempting to explain, could you imagine what would happen if your body moved the same way that your thoughts and emotions did? What would your body look like? And would you accept that? I don't think so. You would not accept all of that. It would be amazing. So now that is a concise decision that you've made for yourself, that will not ever happen. So now that same conviction, that same developed understanding and clarity, we now want to apply to our inner world, our inner literal reality. So within the ancient writings of yoga and also other traditions, they talk about the mind experience as actually being the astral plane of consciousness. So void of us being fully conscious in that realm of higher activity, we are actually engaging with it. Now that puts everything into huge perspective for me when I start to contemplate about that. So the conduct that then I engage with within my own experience of mind, I want to choose to engage with the same way that I choose to engage with my body's conduct sitting here in front of you. So gone are the days, ideally, of this pretend buffer that says nobody really knows what's going on inside this inner realm. And instead, engaging with the same responsibility levels. I know that's a scary word sometimes because we have so much of it, but the same level of engagement of responsibility on the inner reality that we have with the outer reality, so that then everything stays strong and we're engaging the strength of the inner mind muscles, so the deep mind muscles. Do you know what I mean by that? So if I say, produce a yellow dot in front of your eyes, and I think we even did this last week, and you can do that, and now dissolve the yellow dot. How did you do that? Now produce a green dot. And most of you were able to do that. Now dissolve it. Disappeared. How did you do that? So what is that building block, that mechanism of strength that enables you to do that? That's what we want to cultivate a relationship with. The mechanism that just actually manifested a yellow dot and then dissolved it. So that means all thought levels that are manifesting for you that you're seeing, you've done that. On the subconscious level, you've done that. So that's where this relationship between conscious and subconscious becomes so important, because a lot of this thought activity is pouring out of the subconscious, which means that our relationship with ourselves on a conscious level is often not necessarily that balanced. So we make a conscious request, "Psst, hey, would you mind helping me out? I'm a bit uncomfortable. Please go home now," for instance. And you're like, "No, I'm not going home." Right there, the complexity engages, because now that request is coming from a very authentic place inside. Request denied, reprocessed through the subconscious, and then remanifesting within the conscious as something completely different, but with the same messaging capacity. You see what I mean? So it's the relationship that the relationship which we want to cultivate is that with the developer of the thought, which we've established as us, as the individual experiencer. But within that individual experience, it becomes so subtle in its available layers of being conscious that we actually lose track of it as being who we are. And we're like, wait a minute, what is that thing that is manifesting all of this reality for me? Completely slipping on the fact that it's actually who we are. Becomes very profound. So as we increase in subtlety, we always want to be present as this observer engaging with itself in relation to a subject or an object, something that you're looking at. And we want to determine our attitudes towards that which you are looking at, your attitude towards that which you're feeling. Because now immediately we begin to then work with the level of the personality within our meditation practice, which then has a direct influence on the emotions, which has a direct influence on the thought. So we can start to really mold and shape a seat of freedom, where we are quite joyously denying all sensory patterns that are coming from this active mind that is categorized as the lower mind within the meditation experience. So that of thought, that of emotion, that of sensation is this lower activity. It's always engaged. We want to go into a transcended state of that activity, into a higher form of intelligence, so that this intelligence is that which is void. Void of thought, void of emotion, void of personality. It is that which is inspiring and fueling all of those aspects of who we are. So at no turn do we ever get any rest from this mechanism, thank goodness. Because human beings have such an incredible capacity and threshold that we must push ourselves to like the very limit before we see the opening or the outpoint that we've been looking for. So if we have a 24-hour day, that means we have 24 hours to engage with ourselves on this level. On this level meaning all levels. And choosing to be really conscious and aware of these discrepancies that are pulling you away from full engagement. Any questions? You're good.
And this is, I mean, potentially what you've been talking about the whole time that you've been talking, but how does that time within the space directly enable the mind, the chattering mind, to sort of start to eventually wrap itself, or wrap its head around something? Like the mind again and again and again.
Mm-hmm.
It's I don't know how I feel about this. I don't know how I feel about this. How, by disengaging with it for the time being and then simply just residing within that space, how does that space then, do you know what I mean? Naturally,
it naturally happens. Wherever your attention goes, so whatever you are looking at, whatever you decide to create as your focal point, that's then what naturally begins to strengthen and engage. So you are now choosing where to put that energy, that attention, that concentration, and that then what is going to strengthen. The other aspects which we are not paying attention to, they start to weaken. So actually, if you don't use it, you do lose it. So this is, again, if there is something that's challenging inside, it's because you keep using it. It is funny like that. So it's such an intimacy of trust that one develops with oneself. Not through fate or blind belief, but through direct experience. And that's why it can feel a little bit slower, because you are doing it for yourself, to yourself. So sometimes it feels like it's taking so long, but really it's not that long. One whole lifetime is not inconceivable length of time to be focused just on one aspect of yourself. Which sounds funny, but that one aspect always opens up to every other layer. And then eventually you see that, wait, this is an eternal process. And that eternal can mean so many different things. You could be a romantic and say, I live forever. I am eternal. But you can see it in many ways, based on DNA, based on genetics, generational development. So any which way we look at it, we are evolving. We're moving forward. So lastly, really, what I'd like to say is that the forms of thoughts that we have are individual as much as they can possibly be, but at the same time, they're connected to the collective. So if you're having a thought, whatever it may be, guaranteed there's 30 other people who are having that same thought. 300 people who are having that same thought. So no matter where we look, there is evolution which is connected to every single human being on the planet. So if there is an element of truth to that shared thought that you can wrap your head around and sit with, then it makes really great logical sense not to pay too much attention to those general thinking processes that you know are outdated and always are getting you into some kind of funny business when you're sitting with your eyes closed. And then rather focus on the most intimate of intimate thought experiences that you have for yourself. So now what would that thought sound like? Would it have any audible dialogue to it? What would it feel like? What would it smell like? What would it taste like? All those senses again engaging with it. And if we keep focusing on that which is coming from the depth of the self within meditation, and then classifying every other distractive form of thinking as actually not being ours. Because it's ludicrous. How are you saying, I do not want those thoughts, but yet they're coming in? That is ludicrous to me. So to focus around that which is authentically who you are, and surrender and release that which is not who you are, is then a very sound and relatable technique within your meditation practice. For the simple reason of example that where your attention goes, where you place your focus for that subject-object relationship, everything naturally develops that way. So the surrendering of all other formations of thought, which you could categorize as active engagement within your reality, let them do whatever they want. And then over the course of 2 weeks to 22 years, you will successfully, authentically have a quality of space which is uninterrupted by any other thought. And you would have done it for yourself, to yourself, with yourself. Does that make sense? So we remove the timelines and we get to the heart and the root of the activity which you wish to engage with and the outcome that you wish to bring to fruition. That's what we focus on. The fact that your inner mind muscles are not that strong yet is just the simple fact. But what is also the fact is that you're engaging with it. So engage with that, right? When you are building muscles within your body, you do not lift the weight and say, oh, I'm just so weak. I just feel so weak right now. You're saying, wow, this is really hard, but I'm getting stronger. You're actually getting stronger. And you can see it and feel it. But the mind is the same way. You're actually getting stronger. You can see it and you can feel it. It's just more subtle. So that split second of maintaining a quality of space, you've just lifted the weight. See what I mean? So now you're choosing that language. Choose a different language. I could tell you many stories. I spent years with this exact level of engagement with my meditation where I would have a thought, but then I would do the opposite thought. I don't need that. I need quiet. So it was a learning process again and again and again and again. And the sensations that come from that. I mean, you could start screaming in public quite easily. It feels so incredibly good. Nothing competes with that sensation. And it's real. It's very, very real. So then it's becoming interested in yourself on that level, right? We are sensory-driven beings. Sensory-driven beings as humans. You like it every time. You like all of it all the time. You enjoy, you find it. So now it's just cultivating the relationship and the attitudes towards that subtlety that is as enthusiastic as what you find fun right now. It is that same fun. Like when I talk to 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds about meditation, sometimes they say, I'm bored. It's getting bored. When I talk to 30-year-olds and 33-year-olds, they say the same thing. So that shift of engagement with the mechanism that creates the beacon of I'm bored, or I'm tired, or I don't want to do this anymore. So we must make quiet out of that to see really, well, what's there. Special. And if you can connect to it and just keep working with it joyously and see how much energy you can build inside the body as momentum towards that. How much peace, how much harmony, how much understanding. Just with that little piece. If you can make it 5 minutes, and then 5 more minutes, and then. Any final questions? Does this make sense? It's nice and quiet. Good, let's close our eyes. In its simplicity of explanation, meditation, as you become deeper with it, is a recharge station. At the very least, you are recharging the body and mind on a supreme level. The more quiet you become, the stronger the charge. Keeping the eyes closed, bring full deep breaths into the body. Keeping the eyes closed. Maintain a concentrated gaze into the space so that all you see is the space itself, with that subtle vibration, maintaining the quality of space which is uninterrupted by thought. Just the profound recognition of the space itself. Keeping the eyes closed, soften your gaze. And now very slowly, gently, allow the eyes to open. And as you're coming out of the meditative practice, notice all aspects of your experience. The aspect which you know that you can just simply let go of. So all that thinking, processing of the day, all of that stuff really happened, which means it's a part of your meditative experience. And we have a task that we can then, or we have an avenue then to work with those particular forms of thinking, which is just simply surrendering and letting it go. It's just doing what it does. But then there's the other aspect of your meditation practice that felt like the direction which you wish to keep going in. The forms of sensations that you equate to a meditative experience. So then that is then where we put more attention to cultivate. So that which we are letting go of, and this is almost a constant, and that which we are then promoting and developing, and that is also a constant. Very simple. This quality of space that you are naturally developing within your meditation is exactly that, natural. Naturally harmonizing, balancing, developing in a direction that is conducive for you as an individual to thrive. Increased vitality. If it is not that, and you know that it is challenging you in an expired way, which is no longer needed, the mechanism for that is already in place. Simply surrender it and let it go. It will just simply play itself out. You will get tired of it. Thank you very much, everyone. Namaste. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you.